Hello, this is your host, Adam Liu, back with the COVID is Really Bad podcast. So, this episode is going to be about how COVID damages your immune system through this thing called T cell or immune exhaustion. That's one of the theories, anyway. So, COVID-19, that's the thing that everybody forgot about. However, we're all living with it right now. People are still getting infected every year. Millions of people getting infected every year. If you look at the wastewater data, I know people aren't testing anymore, but it's still very prevalent in our everyday lives. And not only that, people getting the after effects of COVID, or what people call long COVID, something that I have, brain fog, fatigue, etc., etc. However, there's a substantial amount of evidence that says that COVID damages your immune system, even in those who don't even have what you can consider long COVID. The first study we'll look at took place in China. It studied 3 different extremely large groups of people. The first group is when COVID restrictions were in place. So the assumption is that this is a non-COVID infected group. The second group is when there was a COVID peak. So the assumption is that these people all had COVID. And the third is after the COVID peak. So there's no confirmed PCR test. It's just a large population study. However, it found that there were a depleted amount of T cells in the post-COVID population. And basically what T cells are, they're immune cells that help you remember and fight future infections. And the theory was that COVID sort of tires out your immune system during the infection, and after there's this thing called immune exhaustion, which is why your T cells are depleted after an infection. However, you might not believe this study. It's just one study. There's no control group. There's a lot of flaws with the study. There's no control group. It only studied one region in the world. There's no confirmed PCR test, et cetera, et cetera. So let's look at another study. This second study, it studied 110 people who had COVID versus a control group of non-COVID infected people. And in the infected group, it found that there was a depleted amount of T cells. It was 10, 12 months after the infection. So both very, very concerning, and that's pretty substantial evidence that COVID, in fact, does damage your immune system. However, these are just scientific studies. If our immune systems were collectively getting weaker, wouldn't we see a rise in illnesses across the board? Well, we would actually, and that's what we are seeing. 2024-2025 was the worst flu season in decades, according to many experts. And this past flu season, 2025-2026, it was known that vaccines were not as effective against this flu virus, and the flu did not calm down at all. It was a really bad flu season this past flu season, and there's a 2025 study published in The Lancet. It tracked more than 830,000 U.S. veterans and found that even non-admitted patients who tested positive for COVID had higher rates of bacterial, viral, and fungal infections in the year that followed. And then a 2024 analysis by the CDC found that invasive group strep A infections saw their most dramatic year-on-year increase from 2021 to 2022. You might argue that there's this idea of immunity debt, and that the lockdowns and the non-pharmaceutical interventions of us not getting infected might have weakened our immune systems. However, these sicknesses are lasting well past the date of our lockdowns. So I would say that the idea that the rise in these infections is because of immunity debt is not true, because of the fact that these sicknesses are persisting well past the date of our lockdowns. And okay, if you don't believe me, these studies, look at long COVID Reddit pages, look at Facebook long COVID pages. There's plenty of people talking about how COVID has weakened their immune system, how perhaps they even developed an autoimmune issue after COVID, how when they get an infection, a lot of their long COVID symptoms worsen, how they did some immune tests after getting COVID, or how perhaps they even get sick a lot more often after catching COVID the first time. So yes, this is all very, very concerning stuff. And this is why, a part of the reason why we should take COVID a lot more seriously as a society. I'm not saying we should lock down again, but, take preventive, realistic measures to keep yourself from getting sick, like testing and even masking sometimes, and good ventilation indoors. These are realistic things that we can do as a society to make sure our immune systems don't get weaker, because if our immune systems are collectively getting weaker as a society, that's not a good thing. That means more people getting sick, less people working, more people dying, et cetera, et cetera. This is not something that we can simply just live with the rest of our lives, because COVID is not it's something that you want to get. It's something that mutates and then mutates to evade our immune system, and then not only evades our immune system, weakens it and tires it out so much that you're more susceptible to infections months, even years after getting a COVID infection. So yeah, that's Adam Liu with the COVID is Really Bad podcast. This is the first episode of hopefully many, and good day. Bye.